Hello.
Hello.
We're finally doing another one of these after the since last Christmas technically because we did a lot of these then and then we haven't done one since, so we're doing another one. Yeah, for this we're reacting to more of Mr. Nightmare's stuff. The Wait, are you pulling up the videos or
Yeah.
okay, let me just resize this.
Can you see it? Can you
So
hear
you
it?
think you know Wix? Do you really?
Do you really?
Actually, should can you still hear it?
Yeah, I can still hear it.
Actually, I'll just play it. Should I put it on full screen?
Probably. Yep. I think that's good.
This is not working.
Your earbud's giving you problems.
I'm a single mother of my 8-year-old boy Mark.
You're having issues with your earbuds.
When this happened, he was 5 and I was 27.
The audio sounds better whenever you.
The audio sounds better when I have them on.
Wait, what does it sound like when you have them off?
I have my own
Yeah,
house
no, it
that was
sounds
passed
better
down
when
to
you
me
have
from my
them off.
grandparents.
Actually, probably just put them. I'll probably just put them on, but just play it. It sounds better when I have it off.
Yeah, like whenever you have it on, it for some reason it echoes through your mic.
Maybe I'll just have them off then.
Okay, but does it play it?
Should I put a full screen?
Yeah, full screen.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
I'm a single mother of my 8-year-old boy Mark. When this happened, he was 5 and I was 27. I have my own house that was passed down to me from my grandparents. It's in the quiet side of town with a lot of older people, and I still live here with Mark today. It was Christmas time, and I was out with Mark shopping. I was doing my Christmas shopping for my family. Mark and I went to the mall, including a few clothing stores and a hardware store where I bought a gift for my dad. After all the shopping was done, I took Mark to McDonald's to get him some burgers and ice cream. Afterwards, we left the mall through the south exit, and here we bumped into a mall Santa standing outside. He waved at us and said the usual Santa stuff. He then knelt down to get to Mark's level and asked him what he wanted for Christmas. Mark led my hand closer to the Santa, and I allowed it because he seemed like a normal, nice mall Santa. Mark said he wanted a
Yep.
Nintendo Switch, which ironically was what I was planning on buying him for Christmas. The Santa laughed and said, "If you're good, maybe you'll get it," while looking up at me and winking. I smiled, and then he stood up and started complimenting me, saying to Mark, "Your mother's a looker, Mark, you know that?" And Mark laughed, even though he didn't know what that meant. I still smiled. Then we had a couple minutes worth of seemingly friendly adult conversation about the holiday mayhem and such. The guy said he worked for the mall. I regrettably mentioned the stress of being a single mom during Christmas is unfathomable, and then I made a joke about needing Santa's help. Then the Santa made what I thought was an innocent joke, saying, "Mark, have you ever heard the song 'I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus'?" And Mark shook his head yes. Then he leaned in towards me with his cheek, implying he wanted me to kiss his cheek. I was going to give him an innocent little peck on the fake beard, but as I leaned in, He turned his head and tried doing that old trick where he kisses you on the lips instead. I moved my face away in time. The way he did it was so creepy and aggressive, too. He looked at me and started doing the Santa kind of laugh, but there was nothing jolly about it. I said, "Come on, Mark," and we started walking away. He yelled "Merry Christmas," and that was the last thing I heard him say. As we drove away past the back exit of the mall, I noticed he wasn't there in front of the entrance anymore. I wish I took that into consideration as to what may have happened next. We got home, and after bringing everything inside, I locked the door, and Mark and I started to watch a Christmas movie. Our wholesome time together was then interrupted. My doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was late for any kind of door-to-door people. I told Mark to keep watching as I went to go answer the door. I said, "Who is it?" through the door, and a man's voice on the other side said, "It's Santa." My heart dropped. I said, "If you're the mall Santa..."
Money makes the world go round. Crypto makes the world go forward.
Ad.
Yo, 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 yo!
Why do... That was dumb.
"Please go away, or I'm calling the cops." He replied, "You dropped something out of your bag, miss. I'm just looking to return it." I replied, "What did I drop?" He replied, "I don't know, miss. I'm not looking to be nosy, but if you open the door, I can hand it to you." I repeated myself that I wanted him to leave now. I then decided to call the mall management office of the mall to report this, but the man on the phone said they don't officially hire any mall Santas at this mall, and that whoever's dressing as Santa is doing it on their own accord. With that bit of information, I felt incredibly unsafe. I went back to be with Mark, but my mind was elsewhere now. I felt this sickly, worried feeling in my gut. I made an excuse to get up again after a few minutes. I went to the kitchen out of earshot of the TV. I raised the blinds to the kitchen window. I couldn't see anything out there, being that the kitchen light was on and it was pitch black outside. But I heard a man yelling, "Ho, ho, ho." He was probably out there watching me at that very moment, looking out the window. I had no choice but to call the police and report that I was followed by a man dressed as Santa. I told Mark to keep watching the movie, and I spoke to the police outside. They took a report and were on their way. The police having come made me feel just a little better. A few nights later, though, my doorbell rang again, around the same time, if not a little later. Mark was already asleep tonight. I was in the living room watching a show. I turned off the TV and went upstairs to my room, which is connected to Mark's room. The doorbell didn't ring again, but I never went back downstairs that night. It wasn't until the next day when I was leaving the house that I found the note taped to my front door. It was typed out and printed. This is a picture of the note, and it said, "I'll just be blunt. I'm sure you can guess who this is. I didn't mean to scare you the other night. I just had a long shift, and when a pretty lady talks to you after pretending to be Santa for 6 hours, hormones kind of go crazy. You and your son are the cutest things ever, and I'd love to one day be a part of your family. You can't pretend you didn't feel the connection when we spoke the other night. I already know where you live, now I just need your number. Feel free to shoot me a text whenever, and maybe we can plan something one day. Sorry, I know this may seem creepy or a bit much, but I'm the kind of guy where if I see something I like, I go after it. Anyway, happy holidays if we don't speak soon. Here's my number. Best, Ted." I wanted to crumple this up, but I took a picture of it, called the police again, and gave this to them. Since it had his number on it, the police could work with that. They said I'd be hearing from someone when action was taken, and that following Monday, I got a call from, I assume, a detective telling me that the man would not be contacting me anymore, and if he did, to let him know. I never heard from that creep again. I assume the police threatened to arrest him if there was any further contact. This is a short but scarring story nonetheless from my early childhood. I grew up in an average middle-class home in the suburbs. My sister and I were huge fans of Christmas as kids. I had to be like 6 years old when this happened, because we had just moved to our new house. This is one of my earliest memories in life that I remember vividly just because of the gravity of it. On Christmas Eve, I would always have trouble sleeping, even as a young kid, just due to anticipation. I would stay up really late playing video games in my room on my old box TV. I'd play until I just fell asleep from exhaustion. This night in question, I was playing a Star Wars game for the PS1, and when I had to go to the bathroom, I turned the volume down low and quietly snuck out of my room, because I knew my mom would get mad if she heard me sneaking around on Christmas Eve night. I snuck to the upstairs bathroom, and when I was done, I was quietly going back to my room when I heard the sound of the tree rustling around downstairs. My first instinct was to think, Santa. I started tiptoeing down the stairs until I got to the bottom. The sound of the rustling pine needles was louder now. I peeked around the bottom wall of the stairway into the living room. There were no lights on, except for someone holding a flashlight. I could see
Are you
only
making
the
lunch?
person's legs as they were bent over behind the tree. There was a black bag on the floor, and this random adult man came out from behind the tree and looked at me. He looked at me and put his pointer finger up to his mouth, and he made a shushing motion with his lips. He whispered, "Yes, I'm Santa." I was old enough and smart enough to know that wasn't what the Santa I grew up knowing looked like. I started screaming for my mom and dad as loud as I could. I remember the man started freaking out, deciding whether or not to take the bag he filled with our gifts, and he ended up running away to the front door. I don't remember if he had to unlock it or if it was already unlocked or not. I just remember him leaving through the front door, and seconds later my parents running down the stairs. I'm sure I screamed there was a man in here, and them seeing the black bag on the floor filled with our would-have-been stolen gifts proved that. Here's where my memories started getting fuzzy, so I had to ask my parents what happened next. But my dad told me he went outside in his slippers and ran all over the place ready to kill someone. Half the ornaments on the tree were taken off and in the bag. What kind of sick, evil person steals people's sentimental Christmas ornaments? According to my dad, the method in which the man broke in was the back door, which it appeared he yanked open with a crowbar due to the chipped wood. A house a few blocks away had also fallen victim to this, and it was on the news. It was most definitely the same guy. I don't remember much from when I was 6, but this is a memory that most of it still sticks in my brain like it was only a few years ago.
It's a taste of
Great, I love ads.
a day not to miss.
It was December 2020. My fiancé and I bought a house together a few years ago. It's a cute house in a decent neighborhood, a nice area to raise a family. That's why what happened 2 years ago was all the more shocking and disgusting. We know all of our neighbors, both our next door neighbors and the 3 closest neighbors across the street. Everyone is friendly enough, but you truly never know the skeletons hidden in someone's closet. Our neighbor Paul to the right always seemed nice the few times we'd speak, but he never really spoke too much. I'd see him outside almost every day, either coming or leaving for, I'm assuming, work, though I never knew what he did for a living. At this time, I hadn't seen the guy in a few days, and his car hadn't moved from his driveway. Obviously, that in of itself isn't any cause for alarm. All of the neighbors, including Paul, had their lights up already. I found it interesting how Paul, a single man in his 40s, would put lights up. I actually found it kind of nice. I was late to the party putting my Christmas lights and decorations up outside one night. While doing so, I noticed Paul's Christmas lights out of nowhere started flickering like crazy. All of them, not just one strip of lights. It looked like it could have just been faulty wiring or some electrical glitch. The next day, I left for work around 10 and noticed again Paul's car was still in the driveway. I also noticed all the blinds in his house were still closed. Even when I got back from work, the blinds were all closed, but his Christmas lights were on, so he was definitely home. I joked with my fiancé that he must have been on some kind of hibernation. Later that night, my fiancé came inside and told me of Paul's Christmas lights acting up. I went outside and it was the exact same thing that was happening the night before. The flickering wasn't happening in a way that would appear that he programmed it that way. It was happening in a very spastic, glitchy sort of way. So I figured I'd be nice and go let him know, and also see if he's okay since I hadn't seen him. I knocked on the door, and when there was no answer, I rang. All the blinds were closed and I couldn't tell if the lights were on or not. When there was no answer, I rang one more time. Finally, the door opened and Paul greeted me. I let him know about his flickering lights, which I just noticed weren't flickering anymore. I promised him I wasn't making it up. He said he wasn't aware of that and thanked me. I asked if he was alright, as I hadn't seen him in a while. He said he was just feeling under the weather. He was acting a bit off. Then I heard something from inside the house. At first I thought I was imagining it, but it sounded like a child screaming for help. Paul didn't have any kids. I was about to ask him, "Did you hear that?" But on the spot I decided not to. I said goodbye and walked back to my house. Then I told my fiancée to call the police right now. I think Paul has a child in his house. Her reaction was literally, "What did you say?" I said, "I think Paul kidnapped a child." So I called the police and said I think I heard a child screaming inside my neighbor's house. My neighbor who doesn't have kids and hasn't been leaving his house the past week or two. I asked to keep who made the call anonymous, though I knew Paul wouldn't be so stupid as to not know it was me who made the call. Sure enough, the police arrived and entered his house on exigency, and when I heard what they found, I was appalled. There was a young boy locked in the basement. He had been locked down there for 4 days. The boy had been kidnapped from a completely different town. As far as the flickering lights, the boy was a genius and somehow found a way from the basement to flicker the Christmas lights as an attempt to call for help and get someone's attention outside. Probably whenever he saw someone through one of the blocked off basement windows. I reckon he saw his chance to call for help when someone, me, was at the front door. Clearly a very smart kid with great survival instincts. I'm glad he was reunited with his family. I don't want to know what was done to him, but I hope he lives a normal life and has put this behind him. Knowing how serious of a crime child kidnapping is, Paul won't be getting out of prison anytime soon.
Hey, if back, knee, hip, or
Don't you
shoulder
love
pain
that?
is keeping you from staying fit and you're in the Mercer County area, you don't want to miss this special offer.
Great.
I was home alone one weekend, so my girlfriend Jenny came over to spend the weekend with me. It was the middle of December, and Christmas festivities were in full swing. Jenny wanted to watch Christmas movies tonight, so we ordered food, drank wine, and sat by the Christmas tree in the living room watching Christmas movies. We started with The Polar Express, then we started watching Elf. We ran out of wine, so I decided I'd run to the liquor store down the block to get more. It would only take 10 minutes anyway. It was a Saturday night, so they were open later. The usual cashier was working, and I got stuck in a conversation with him like I always do whenever I go there. Mid-conversation with him, I felt my phone vibrating in my pocket. I checked my phone to see it was Jenny. I interrupted the cashier, saying 1 sec, and I picked up. Jenny sounded scared, saying she keeps hearing noises from below the living room. That would mean the crawl space. I told her it's fine, there's nothing down there. She asked me to stay on the phone with her until I got back, so I did. I walked the 5-minute walk back home, and Jenny was still on the couch. She had the movie paused still, saying that she was listening for sounds. When I asked her if she heard any other sounds, she said no. She asked what if there's an animal down there. I told her that's not possible, as there's no openings from anywhere outside. I opened the wine bottle, and we continued to watch the movie. It wasn't long after that we both heard a distinct thud type of sound from below us. From the crawl space. I looked at Jenny and she looked at me. She was right, there was something down there. I said, oh shit, there might actually be an animal down there. Once again, we paused the movie and I went to the closet with the attic door inside. I grabbed the flashlight on the ledge and went down into the crawl space. I stayed by the crawl space door and just did a quick scan of the place. There are a million boxes down there, so a small animal could have been hiding anywhere. It smelled like piss in there, which pretty much confirmed that there was something down there. I'm not an exterminator or pest control, so there was nothing I could do about it. I told my parents about it in the family group chat and told my dad he'd have to call pest control tomorrow. Then, as I was climbing back up the stairs, I heard something from across the crawl space. I don't know what it was, but something moved. I got scared that some animal was gonna run at me,
Hi.
so I hurried up the stairs and shut the door. There wasn't much else we could do now except just go back to the living room and finish watching the movie. After Elf ended, we went to my room and eventually went to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night having to pee really badly and with a throbbing headache. I got up and opened my bedroom door and looked down into the dark hallway. At the end of the hallway, I saw a person's silhouette. I almost screamed, but instead I closed the door quietly and locked it. I heard footsteps coming down the hallway, and then the
Hi.
doorknob turned,
You're
and
leaving
someone
now?
tried opening the door.
Okay.
And then a deep, hoarse-sounding voice on the other side said, "Hello?"
No.
That was when
How
Jenny
long are
started
you
to
actually
scream.
leaving for?
She had been woken up by my getting
How long
up,
are you actually
and
leaving
she heard the
for?
voice too. I would have tried to
No.
calm her down, but I was scared shitless myself. I did hear footsteps walk away from the door, and so I called 911.
Oh yeah, you guys are going to pick up
Waiting
your
for the cops
lenses.
felt like a millennium. All I know is when the cops got here, there
Oh
was
yeah,
no one else in
yeah,
this house.
frames.
Whoever it was left. The smell of piss in the crawl space wasn't my imagination. There was literally a puddle of that person's piss on the ground, which is pretty disturbing because that would suggest that he had been down there for a while. While it was likely a homeless squatter, that didn't make it any less horrifying. My family didn't even believe it at first. I've never forgotten to lock the door ever again.
Okay, so that was that video.
Right. Yeah.
The next one. Okay, so next up we're
Okay, so
doing
now we're gonna do
the New
New
Year-
Year's horror stories. New
yes,
Year's Eve.
and then yeah, the next time we'll probably do the winter one and then another one along with it, but I don't know 100% what that one will be.
I chose Wix for my business because of its massive scope for functionality and freedom of creation.
It was December 31st, New Year's Eve. My friend Alex hired me to watch his dog Bailey for the weekend while he was out of town for the new year. I'm 35, he's 27, so I don't have that same urge to go out and party for New Year's Eve like he does. So I was more okay with making some money and taking it easy for the night. New Year's Eve was on a Saturday. He left for the city early in the day when I got there. He'd be back Sunday night. He left me with very basic instructions: to just feed him and walk him twice a day and keep him off the furniture. Bailey is a very small husky mix. I'm not sure what else she is, but she's about a third the size of a regular husky, and she's very quiet and well behaved. Hence why Alex was okay with me watching her instead of a dog sitter. I brought a backpack which contained my laptop, charger, toiletries, and a change of clothes for Sunday. Alex and I don't go way back. We met through mutual friends and had started going out occasionally on the weekends ever since. I would be sleeping in the spare bedroom of his house on the futon. Throughout the day, I just did stuff on my laptop and played some of Alex's video games. Later in the night, I invited my girl over with Alex's permission. His response was, "You better not in my bed," a way of jokingly saying yes, she can come over. She said she'd be getting out of work after 12, but then she'd come straight over. Alex's house is about half an hour from us, so my girl Trisha wouldn't be getting there until late. I had to kill the time alone with Bailey watching movies until then. We were in the living room, and Bailey was by my feet. It was probably 9 p.m. when the doorbell rang. I went to answer the door, and it was a girl at the door. She looked about 30. She had a hoodie on and was holding a jacket. She introduced herself as Alex's girlfriend and said she left something here that she needed to grab. I offered to grab it if she wanted, and she said no, it's okay. She knew where it was in his room. I said okay, that's fine, and let her inside. She went straight upstairs to Alex's room and slightly closed the door behind her without latching it. I right away texted Alex, "I didn't know you had a girlfriend." She was in there for quite some time, until she came back out, still holding her jacket. She came back down the stairs and thanked me and was going straight for the door. I tried to stop her for a quick conversation, saying, "How long have you guys been dating?" And she said, "Too long," then laughed, as if making a joke. I laughed too, and then she said, "Have a good night." I was a bit surprised by the interaction, but what I gathered from it was they had probably just recently broken up. Now I started to worry that maybe I shouldn't have let her in. Since Alex hadn't answered my text yet, I called him a few times before he picked up. He was out with his friends in a loud setting, so he could hardly hear me until he went outside to talk. I told him his girlfriend just came by to grab something, and he was completely bewildered at what I was saying. "Who are you talking about?" he said. I responded, "She said she was your girlfriend. I didn't get a name." He said in a yell, "You know I don't have a girlfriend. What did she look like?" I started to feel really stupid just about now. I described the girl, and he said he had no idea who this could have been. I then proceeded to explain to him that she went upstairs to his room for a few minutes, then came back down. This was when he started freaking out. He told me to go up to his room now and check if she stole anything. Of course, I didn't know what was in his room beforehand, so he had me check for specific things, which all appeared to still be there. He tried hard to figure out who it could have been, and said he'd call me back after he made some calls and sent me some pictures of different girls. Understandably, this was putting a damper on his night. I could tell he'd already been drinking, so I felt awfully stupid for letting some random girl into the house. He started sending me screenshots of different girls' Instagram accounts, none of them resembling the girl who came in. When I said no to all of them, he went silent for an hour. Then he texted me randomly, "I think I know who it was. Make sure she doesn't come back." I didn't ask any further questions. I responded, "Okay, my bad," and left it at that. Clearly Alex was going through some serious girl drama, or so I thought. I watched the ball drop alone. Not that I really care about the new year or the ball drop at all. Later that night, Trisha finally made it over, and so we hung out in the living room together. I told her what happened, and she was shocked. But then a freakish coincidence happened. Bailey lifted her head and looked at the front door, and then there was a knocking at the door.
This is one of those moments where you gotta ask yourself,
Ads.
Commercials.
what do I want?
We've got 8 scientists frozen into a block of flesh.
Whoever it was didn't ring the bell. There was no shot I was opening it. I called Alex a bunch of times, but he didn't pick up. He was wasted and didn't even feel his phone vibrating. Trisha and I stayed quiet, and eventually whoever it was went away. I was honestly unnerved now. Surely it was in connection to whoever that girl was earlier. Maybe it was even her again. Either way, I didn't want to get involved any further in what was going on. After this, we decided to migrate to the spare bedroom where we'd stay for the night on the futon. We had a movie on as we laid down and I held her. We fell asleep in this position and woke up at some unknown hour in the night, which I later found out was less than an hour after we fell asleep. I woke to Bailey's howling. She was in the room with us. Trisha woke up after me. Bailey was at the bedroom door with her tail wagging, howling. I whispered, "Bailey, shush." She looked at me and then came over, but she stayed staring at the door, now growling, making unhappy whimpering sounds. Then there were footsteps outside on the wood floors. We heard what had to be at least 2 pairs of footsteps, tiptoeing to the door, and then the doorknob twisted. By force of habit, we had the door locked, thankfully, and a girl's voice said, "Alex?" I looked at Trisha and signaled for her to stay quiet. That girl was not alone. Another light tap at the door, and then the girl's voice said, "Who's in there? This is Alex's house." I made the decision to say in a loud voice, almost a yell, "The cops have been on their way for a few minutes now, just so you know." The girl said, "Who are you?" I didn't bite. I whispered to Trisha to actually call the police, and she did. The entire time she whispered into the phone. I said loud and clear, "I dare you to do something, because the time you do it, the cops will be running through the front door." I heard a whisper on the other side of the door. Then, multiple pairs of footsteps walking away from the door. We stayed in the room, waiting for the cops to get there. Since the front door was left wide open by those people, the cops came right in. The house was clear by this point. I gave my entire recount of the story, and then called Alex multiple times until he finally picked up, still sounding pretty drunk. One cop talked with him on the phone for a few minutes, while I sat with Trisha speaking with another cop. After all this was said and done, the accepted assumption was that there was a key in Alex's room taken by that girl from hours before. This was a pretty messy situation, since Alex couldn't just come all the way home this late. He practically begged me to stay the rest of the night. I had Trisha go home. I stayed because I felt responsible for letting that girl in the first place. I stayed locked in that room the rest of the night with Bailey. I literally wedged a chair against the front door as some half-assed attempt at keeping them out if they decided to return. By morning, though, it seemed that they didn't return. Alex came back earlier that day than originally planned. I'm not going to air out any more private information to the internet than I already have, just in case anyone who knows him can figure out this story is about him. but he did tell me who he thought the girl was, and the story behind it proves that men have to be careful too with the women they choose to interact with. That girl and whoever was with her's intention of breaking in wasn't to steal anything evidently, which is the scariest part. He changed his locks ASAP. I can't even imagine staying in that house if I were him after this. However, it's been a year, and as far as I know, nothing has happened, unless he's keeping more to the story he told me a secret. After returning from a night to celebrate the arrival of the new year, my husband and I returned to our apartment complex to turn in for the night. We both had a couple of drinks, but neither of us were intoxicated. As much as we enjoy partying with friends, when it comes down to it, we are really just homebodies. We lived in the corner penthouse suite of our complex. Although this was never confirmed, it was suspected the owners wanted to convert this apartment complex into condos. The rent certainly was not cheap, and access was limited to this floor. Upon entering the building, there is a walk-up, 2 secured doors, and every now and then, there would be a doorman to greet you as you entered or exited. There were also multiple security cameras placed throughout and around the building. It was an especially cold evening, and when we returned, there was no doorman present. It was late, at least 2 a.m. The foyer was empty, and one of the lights flickered softly. My husband and I entered the elevator and pressed the button to the top floor. The elevator ride was smooth, and as we ascended, I could feel myself becoming more relaxed, excited to finally be home and able to rest. My feet were killing me from wearing heels all night in the bitter cold. The bell chimed, signaling we had reached our floor. The door slid open, and we turned the corner to the left. Like I said, our suite was the corner suite at the end of the hall. However, something caught our eye. A woman, or what at least looked like a woman, was meandering through the hallway. Her hair was dark and scattered. It looked to be matted and covered her face. She wore a black lace dress that was torn and looked to be in bad shape. Thinking back, I don't even think she had any footwear on. We assumed she was intoxicated and was having difficulty finding her suite. Although on closer inspection, she didn't look familiar. We knew all of our neighbors, as like I said, access was limited on this floor. I looked at my husband, who stood still as well. I could see he was contemplating the same thoughts. I asked him, should we ask if she needs help? He looked at me and said, just wait, maybe she's just drunk and having a hard time finding her suite. The woman just continued to slowly slide herself along the walls of the hallway, stopping at each door and peering through the exterior peepholes. Admittedly, this was creepy, but it just added to the theory that she was a drunk woman looking for her friends. She was humming, or what I believe was humming. The sound was something between a growl and a hum. We stood there in utter disbelief and awe. However, there was a veil of tension and uneasiness that lingered. The strange woman stumbled through the hallway, hunched over until she pulled herself up to peer through the peephole. She eventually got to a suite of an elderly lady, whom I have a strong connection with. We'll just call her Tilly. Tilly was the sort of woman whose family had neglected her and rarely visited. She would bring my husband and I baked goods from time to time. I would bring her leftovers and assist her with groceries and medication frequently. Tilly's smoke alarm would constantly go off. I would have to rush over and pull out the smoldering toast from her toaster and fan her smoke alarm until it stopped beeping. At times a nuisance, but it would always turn into tea time. Nevertheless, I cared about Tilly, so when I saw this strange woman peer into her peephole, I reacted. I blurted out, "Excuse me, are you alright?" I could feel myself lose confidence as I asked. The strange woman seemed to shudder for a moment and hunched over to the floor. She looked like she was about to puke, or was frightened by my voice. My husband and I stepped closer, but the woman then let out a series of soft and menacing laughs just barely audible. I have to admit, in this moment I was thoroughly creeped out and reached for my cell phone. It was uncomfortable because we couldn't get to our suite without having to walk right past this deranged woman. My husband said, "Hey, did you hear us? Do you need help?" Her laugh began to grow into what was a steady cackle. The strange woman then stood up. As she stood up, her cackle became a mixture between a cackle and a boisterous growl. She then stumbled forward and continued walking down the hall. There was a staircase just outside of our suite. I assumed she was making her way to the stairs, just too embarrassed to walk past us to the elevator. Maybe she was just a drunk woman and this was nothing more than an uncomfortable standoff with a sad and intoxicated woman. I mean, if she was really that drunk, the stairs probably weren't a good idea. We were on the 7th floor. Nevertheless, I just didn't feel like it was worth the risk to engage with this woman. I just wanted to enter my suite and dive into bed. It was late, and my feet still hurt. As we took a few steps forward, the woman stopped. Almost with laser precision, she stood up completely straight, looked right at our door, and then began to pound on our door, screaming bloody murder. I could feel myself becoming swallowed with fear. I reached for my cell phone and began to dial 911. The woman kept pounding on our door and screaming. To be honest, I'm surprised none of our neighbors came out to see what was happening. Part of me thinks they were too afraid themselves and were probably peering out of their peepholes. Afraid of what our neighbors would think, my husband said, "Hey, what are you doing? Stop that." And just like that, the strange woman stopped, fell to the ground, and began crawling quickly towards us. She looked up for a brief second. All I could see were her dark eyes. Her mouth seemed to be stained black, and she was growling again. But this time, it was as if there was something in her throat that she was choking on. Frozen with fear, my husband and I just watched until she flashed us a menacing hiss, the kind you would hear in a movie, but never imagine in real life. Terrified, I whipped off my shoes, and my husband and I ran towards the staircase on the other side of the building. We didn't want to risk waiting for the elevator and have her catching up. We went down 2 flights of stairs and stopped to listen if she was making her way down the stairs. But it was almost impossible to hear as my heart was pounding so hard. I thought to myself, what the hell was going on? We waited there for 10 minutes or so, until eventually we had the courage to head up the stairs and back to our suite. The woman was gone, and so we entered our suite. I was just relieved to finally be safe in my home. My husband sent a text to our landlord, and he replied that we would hear from him in the morning. I was so unbelievably exhausted, but found it incredibly difficult to sleep. The sound of that woman's growling and cackling rang in my ears. I hardly slept. The next day, when my husband went to speak to the landlord, he asked him to check the security cameras, although nothing turned up. The landlord said the cameras glitched due to the frigid temperatures last night. To this day, I still don't know what to think. That woman most certainly had problems. The question is, was she dangerous? We moved about a year later, but every New Year's Eve, I still think about that night.
Give joy this holiday season with Wawa's handcrafted holiday beverages. Gotta have a Wawa.
Wanna have a Wawa?
It was New Year's Eve of 2020, and all of us were ready for this horrible year to be over. My friend Logan was throwing a house party. I arrived early to help set things up. I secured a spot to sleep in his parents' room, meaning I could drive to the party and drink without having to worry about driving home. His parents obviously weren't home for the night. Most of our close friends in our friend group came, plus a bunch of Logan's friends who I didn't know. The party was fun. At midnight, everyone screamed Happy New Year and cheers their drinks. After that, people slowly started circulating out, and the party started to quiet down, as people went to either other parties, bars, or home. The later the night got, the more it became just the closer friends staying behind until it just turned into a chill drinking session in the living room. This went on late into the night. It was likely 3 a.m. when the last of everyone who wasn't sleeping at Logan's house was gone. As it quieted down, we started hearing this occasional sound. At first we didn't know what it was, but it soon started to sound like a creaking sound. It was dismissed as a sound from the fridge or something at first, which I know sounds stupid, but house appliances often make weird noises. It was just Logan, me, and Cody. Cody was falling asleep on the couch already. It was reaching that time where we were just going to go to sleep. However, eventually we got so bothered by the noise that we had to search. We went to the kitchen, and it wasn't coming from in there. We realized when we were close to the basement door that it was coming from downstairs. Logan opened the door, and we heard this creaking sound. "Go check what it is," I said. He kept saying, "No way." Then he called down into the basement, "Yo, who's down there?" The creaking stopped, and we never heard it again. After a solid minute of waiting at the top of the stairs, we agreed to go down together. We both grabbed knives, drunkenly thinking that was a good idea, when in reality, we were so drunk we'd probably only hurt ourselves with them. We got to the bottom of the stairs and looked through the entire basement. It's not huge. It just has a couch, TV, a bar, a table in the corner, and various old pieces of junk. It was pretty messy at the time.
Wait, Mom,
The
are you
first thing
making
we
lunch?
did was search any possible crevice for someone who could be hiding. Then we tried to figure out what could have been making that sound. I noticed a rocking chair, and so I went up to it, sat in it, and then started rocking in it. And it made the exact same creaking sound we had been hearing. Logan and I looked at each other. I stood up, and so did every hair on my body. I don't think we ever ran faster than we did when we ran up those stairs and slammed the door shut. We tried to come up with any logical explanation, but there was none. He kept the basement door locked for days until his parents came back. There was no living soul down there, but something was moving that rocking chair. That rocking chair used to belong to his grandma, who passed away forever ago, and it's just something his mom held onto for sentimental reasons. I can't say I've ever experienced anything resembling the paranormal before this, nor since then. It still sends chills down my spine.
Okay, I think that's it.
Alright, so
That's it.
this
For,
will be the end of this video.
yeah, we'll be
Then we're
doing
gonna do.
more on.
Let's do the snowstorm one next, separate, and then the paranormal one separate.
I think we'll probably put
Instead of together.
one along with the snowstorm one, but we just have to find out what when we.
Like that's not the paranormal one.
Yeah, no, something else. So like the paranormal one could go with I don't know, like a I don't know.
They could just be the paranormal one and the snowstorm one can both be separate.
I don't know, but for now, this is it for this.
Okay, this is it. See you in the next video.
Yeah, bye. Like it, sub and subscribe and stuff, but yeah, bye.